Sunrise in the suburban enclave of Springtree Meadows was a gentle sight. Rows of well-kept houses lined neat sidewalks, with manicured lawns still damp from sprinkler systems. The neighborhood boasted an air of calm and homogeneity, where daisies bloomed in flower beds, wind chimes tinkled in the mild breeze, and nearly every resident's mailbox complied with strict codes set by the Homeowners Association, HOA. Overseeing these bylaws and house rules was an HOA board known for its pedantry. The loudest and most feared voice on that board belonged to Georgina Trask, a 50-something woman whose clipped tone and impeccable coiffure never wavered in their severity. Most neighbors referred to her behind her back by a single name, Karen. Rumor had it Karen had once been a successful salesperson and now funneled her relentless drive into policing any perceived infringement on neighborhood standards. She took pride in issuing warnings for minuscule offenses, from the color of someone's front door being a shade off the approved palette to a single weed poking through the pavement. Into this setting moved the Kim family: Stan, a software engineer; Corinne, a web designer turned stay-at-home mom; and their two children, Tessa and Hunter. Tessa was in middle school, while Hunter, at 9 years old, was a curious boy with a physical disability that required the use of a small wheelchair and occasional crutches. Springtree Meadows appealed to the Kims as a peaceful place for Hunter to grow up without the hustle of the city. They believed the tidy streets and well-maintained sidewalks would accommodate his mobility needs. When the Kims purchased their house at the end of Dandelion Lane, they expected a calm environment conducive to family life: weekend barbecues, friendly waves from neighbors, and the occasional block party. They also knew about the HOA's guidelines, but assumed they were standard rules to keep the neighborhood clean and safe. Little did they realize that Karen's iron-fisted approach to oversight would soon target them, culminating in a confrontation that no one saw coming. The seeds of conflict were sown innocently enough. One Saturday morning, Corinne chatted with a neighbor, Melissa Roy, about the idea of building a backyard play structure. Hunter yearned for a place to explore, something adapted to his mobility challenges. Corinne dreamed of a simple wooden fort with ramps, so that Hunter's wheelchair or crutches could be accommodated. Tessa, always eager to help her little brother, thought it was an excellent idea. "They do allow play sets, right?" Corinne asked Melissa, a slight note of worry in her tone. Melissa shrugged. "Yes, in principle, but there are specific guidelines about height, color, and location. You want to check with the HOA. Or be prepared for Ms. Karen to swoop in with a complaint." Corinne smiled politely, masking her unease. She filed away the name Karen, not yet grasping the havoc that this single woman could unleash. For the time being, the dream of building an accessible fort ignited hope in the Kim household. Hope that they would create a safe, fun sanctuary for their child. During dinner that evening, Corinne mentioned the possibility of building a small wooden fort designed specifically for Hunter's needs. Tessa nearly jumped out of her chair in excitement. Hunter, wide-eyed, asked, "A fort? With ramps and everything?" Stan nodded. "If we do this, we'd build a little deck with a safety railing, maybe a small roof, a ladder for Tessa or her friends, and a ramp for you, buddy." Hunter's grin lit up the room. Even though he could navigate fairly well with his crutches and wheelchair, typical backyard treehouses or tall playsets were beyond his reach. For him, an accessible fort was a dream come true. Encouraged by their children's enthusiasm, Stan and Corinne flipped through home improvement magazines and scoured online resources for accessible play designs. They found examples of wooden structures built at moderate heights with wide ramps and adapted guardrails. The more they researched, the more confident they felt that this project could be done safely and tastefully. Yet Corinne had a nagging sense of caution. "We should check the HOA guidelines," she said to Stan. "I don't want to invest in materials only to get fined." Stan rubbed his temples. "You're right. Let's see." There was an email from the HOA after we moved in, with a big PDF of rules. "I'll look it up." They spent the next hour combing through dense legalese about fence heights, approved paint colors, mailbox standards, and numerous items that seemingly had no relevance to a small wooden fort. Eventually, they found a short paragraph about children's play equipment, stating it should be discreetly placed, maintained in good repair, and no taller than 12 feet. There was no explicit ban on custom structures, nor was there a mention of ramps. Satisfied that an accessible wooden fort wouldn't violate any obvious rules, the Kims decided to push forward. They'd keep it modest in scale and properly maintain it. If the HOA had questions, they'd be cooperative. But as the saying goes, ignorance is bliss. They still had no real inkling of Karen's capacity for micromanagement or how quickly she could twist benign guidelines into personal vendettas. For now, the family's excitement reigned, overshadowing any apprehension. A week later, the first sign of trouble appeared when Corinne stepped outside to receive a package and found a woman scribbling on a clipboard, hovering near the Kim's property line. Dressed in pressed slacks and a crisp blouse, the woman had a posture of self-importance that was impossible to miss. Corinne recognized her from neighborly descriptions, the dreaded Karen of the HOA. With cautious friendliness, Corinne greeted her. "Hello, can I help you?" Karen turned sharply, as though startled. Her expression was meticulously neutral, but her eyes flickered with scrutiny. "I'm Georgina Trask," she said. "I'm on the HOA board for Springtree Meadows. May I confirm you're Mrs. Kim?" Corinne nodded. "Yes, Corinne Kim. Is there something I can do for you?" Karen pursed her lips. "I've heard you might be planning some sort of large play structure in your backyard. Rumors travel fast, you see, and I like to stay on top of potential building projects in the neighborhood." She tapped her clipboard pointedly. Caught off guard, Corinne tried to stay calm. "Yes, we're thinking of building a small wooden fort for our kids. It won't exceed the height limit, and we'll keep it well maintained. We've read the rules." Karen made a show of flipping pages on her clipboard. "The guidelines do permit certain play equipment, but only if it does not become an eyesore or disturb property values. We prefer standard, store-bought playsets in neutral colors." She gave Corinne a tight smile. "I'd like to inspect your plans before you break ground." A faint sense of indignation flickered in Corinne's chest. "My husband and I have a design that will match our fence color, and it's definitely not going to be an eyesore. We'll keep you posted once we finalize things." Karen's eyebrows rose. "You do that? I'd hate to see a situation where you spend time and money only to be found in violation." With that ominous remark, Karen turned and walked off, leaving Corinne with a sinking feeling. She fought the urge to call out a protest, something along the lines of, "It's for my child with special needs," but held back. She sensed Karen would not be swayed by an emotional appeal. That evening, Corinne recounted the conversation to Stan, who frowned. "We'll document everything," he said firmly. "If we meet all the guidelines, there's nothing she can do. We have a right to build a safe space for Hunter to play." Yet beneath his matter-of-fact tone, Stan also felt a simmering worry that Karen might try to twist the HOA rules. Little did they know just how vindictive she could become when she believed her authority threatened. Despite Karen's hovering presence, the Kims pressed forward. Stan drew up a thorough blueprint of the fort, ensuring it remained under the 12-foot limit and conformed to the yard's boundaries. He included a gentle ramp wide enough for a small wheelchair, a short flight of steps on the opposite side for Tessa and visitors, and a covered platform no more than 5 feet off the ground. They selected sturdy, weather-resistant lumber and matched the color stain to their fence, an HOA-approved, subdued brown. Corinne typed up a quick description of the project, attaching Stan's blueprint. She even emailed it to the official HOA email to confirm. To her relief, the auto-reply said the board typically needed 2 weeks to review non-standard improvements, and if no official denial came, the homeowner could proceed. It was an unusual procedure, but apparently part of the local rules. When the 2-week mark passed without a single word from the HOA, the Kims interpreted the silence as acceptance. They arranged a Saturday for construction, roping in a couple of neighbors and Stan's brother, Michael, who was handy with tools. The morning of the build arrived bright and warm. An air of excitement tinged with apprehension filled the Kim household. Corinne prepared coffee and donuts for the volunteers, while Tessa ran around with measuring tape. Hunter watched from the sidelines, beaming. Though he couldn't do much heavy lifting, he offered moral support, occasionally rolling up to admire the lumber piles. By noon, the base platform was in place. Michael installed a gentle ramp using smooth decking boards and sturdy railings. Meanwhile, Stan worked on framing the short walls. Everything looked exactly as planned, simple, safe, and visually unobtrusive from the street. Around midday, Corinne happened to glance toward the front of the house and saw a familiar figure lurking across the road. Karen. She was standing near a neighbor's driveway, clipboard in hand, watching the backyard activity. Corinne felt a chill. She whispered a quick heads up to Stan and the others, who shrugged. "We're following the rules." "Let her watch," Michael said grimly. After a while, Karen disappeared. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of construction. By sundown, the wooden fort stood upright, lacking only a final coat of stain. They planned to paint it the next day. Hunter rolled up the ramp with Tessa's help and let out a delighted squeal from atop the deck. The volunteers cheered, proud of their accomplishment. Exhausted but happy, Corinne posted a few photos on the neighborhood's social media page, captioned with, "Our new backyard fort, built with love and wheelchair-friendly for our son. Thanks to all who helped." She hoped this positive message would set the tone, letting neighbors see it was a thoughtful addition, not a nuisance. But the next morning, a twist arrived. An official-looking letter from the HOA was taped to their front door. Corinne's hands shook slightly as she opened it, feeling a pang of dread. It stated, "Notice of noncompliance. The structure erected at Kim residence address appears to exceed the permissible scope of children's play equipment and may violate design standards. Immediate cessation of any finishing work is recommended until the board can conduct a formal inspection. Failure to comply could result in penalties." Corinne read it twice, stunned. The letter cited no specific code the fort had violated, just vague references to exceeding permissible scope. She showed it to Stan, who cursed under his breath. They had followed the rules meticulously, even emailed the board beforehand. Why this sudden notice after the project was nearly done? "Well," Stan said grimly, "at least it doesn't say we have to tear it down, just that they want an inspection. Let's see how that goes." Corinne nodded, but worry gnawed at her. She suspected a certain someone was behind this abrupt letter. Karen wasn't about to let them enjoy the new fort without a fight. Little did Corinne know, this was only the beginning of Karen's escalating campaign. Late afternoon a few days later, the Kims were in the backyard, applying the second coat of protective stain to the fort. Tessa was inside working on homework, and Hunter was watching from the patio with interest. Suddenly, the gate to their backyard swung open without warning. In strode Karen, followed by a younger man in a polo shirt carrying a tape measure. Karen scanned the half-dried fort with sharp disapproval. "Afternoon," she said curtly. "This is Todd Sanders, a junior HOA inspector. We've come to assess your structure." Stan, bristling, put down his paintbrush. "Would it kill you to knock on the front door first? This is still private property." Karen held her chin high. "As a board member, I have the right to inspect potential bylaw violations. Mr. Sanders is assisting me with measurements." She turned to her companion. "Todd, let's begin with the height." Todd muttered an awkward greeting, stepping forward with his tape measure to check the fort's uppermost point. Corinne stood by, clenching her jaw, while Stan fumed at Karen's arrogance. After a few moments, Todd shook his head. "It's about 9.5 feet at the peak of the roof, well under the 12-foot maximum." Karen's gaze flickered, then checked the ramp angle. It might be too wide or too steep. She pivoted to Corinne. "This ramp, why is it so large? Typical playsets don't require something so expansive." Corinne swallowed her frustration. "It's for our son. He uses a wheelchair part of the time, and we wanted a gentle incline." Karen sniffed. Todd, see if it protrudes beyond the property line." Todd rolled out the tape measure from the fence to the ramp's edge. "No, it's within the yard boundary, about 3 feet to spare." Karen narrowed her eyes. "Let's see. You do realize that bright stains are generally frowned upon unless specified in the design guidelines." Stan interjected, raising his voice slightly. "This is the same color as our fence, which was previously approved. There's nothing bright about it." Karen pursed her lips. She turned to Todd, voice frigid. "I'll make note of the color anyway. This entire structure stands out more than a standard store-bought swing set." Todd cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "From a measurement standpoint, it meets the guidelines for play equipment." "The color? Well, it's quite close to the fence color, Ms. Trask." Karen's jaw tightened. "Yes. Well, the board will have to vote on whether it violates any aesthetic harmony clauses. Todd, let's finalize the notes." Within minutes, they wrapped up. Karen shot one last critical glance at the fort. "We'll be in touch with the board's decision," she said, voice dripping with condescension. When they left, Corinne exhaled shakily. "She's determined to find something, anything, to cite us for." Stan put a reassuring arm around her. We'll see what they come up with. We're within the rules. They can't force us to remove it if we haven't broken any bylaw. Still, a pang of doubt lingered. Corinne suspected that Karen might escalate beyond official channels, twisting logic to brand the fort as an eyesore or out of character. She didn't realize, however, that Karen's malice ran even deeper, and that, soon, the situation would lurch from bureaucratic harassment to outright vandalism. In the week following the so-called inspection, tension in the Kim household mounted. They anxiously checked their mailbox each day for any official letter. Meanwhile, Corinne noticed that Karen seemed to prowl the neighborhood more frequently, clutching that ever-present clipboard, looking for rule violations. Word of Karen's hostility reached some of the Kim's neighbors, who offered moral support. Melissa Roy, who'd first warned Corinne about Ms. Karen, dropped by with her little boy. "Don't let her intimidate you," Melissa said. "My friend tried to put up a small greenhouse last summer, and Karen made her life miserable. But she eventually prevailed. It's still standing. Just be persistent." Others expressed frustration that Karen seemed fixated on the Kims. "I see no problem with a custom fort," said Jake Darnell, who lived across the street. "It's your yard. The ramp is a great idea for your son. I'm rooting for you." The only voice missing from the conversation was the HOA board itself. No official condemnation or approval arrived, leaving the fort's status in limbo. The Kims used it anyway. Hunter's laughter could often be heard from the deck. Tessa decorated it with a few kid-friendly touches, like streamers and a chalkboard. Each time Corinne heard her children giggling, she felt a surge of reassurance that they'd done the right thing. Yet, as supportive neighbors rallied around them, Karen remained a looming threat. It was as if she was waiting for the perfect excuse to strike. For any normal person, that might have meant more letters or pointless fines. But Karen's next move would go far beyond polite procedure, pushing her from overbearing rule enforcer into the realm of criminal malice. One muggy Thursday afternoon, Corinne was returning from the grocery store when she noticed a large stack of bags by Karen's driveway. They were labeled in big, bold letters, "Concrete Mix." At first, Corinne didn't think much of it. Perhaps Karen was planning some landscaping project. But a quiver of unease ran through her. The bags of concrete gave Karen the potential to do something destructive if she had truly sinister intentions. Corinne brushed aside that grim thought, feeling it was too paranoid. She chided herself. Surely she's not going to do anything crazy, right? That evening, Stan had to work late. Tessa retreated to her room to finish a school project, and Corinne helped Hunter get ready for bed around 9 p.m. The night was hot, so Corinne opened the windows, letting the mild breeze pass through. She noticed the sky was overcast, with occasional rumbles of distant thunder, typical midsummer storms. She double-checked the backyard, ensuring any loose objects were secured if the wind kicked up. The fort stood quietly in the corner, partially lit by the glow of a nearby street lamp. Sometime around 11 p.m., Tessa, still awake, heard a strange scraping sound from the backyard. She tiptoed to her mother's room, whispering, "Mom, there's a noise outside. It's not storming yet, but I heard. I don't know, dragging." Corinne's heart pounded. She grabbed her phone and crept to the back window. The yard was dark, but from the faint porch light, she could see a figure near the fort's base, someone apparently carrying a large bag. Horror washed over her. Could it be Karen? Before Corinne could snap out of her shock, the figure lifted the bag and poured something around the fort's foundation. Corinne realized with dread that it looked like wet concrete, the mixture gloopy and gray, slopping over the wooden supports. A flood of adrenaline propelled Corinne to throw open the back door and shout, "Hey, stop!" But the figure, startled, bolted back through the side gate. Corinne dashed onto the grass, the dampness clinging to her bare feet. She nearly slipped on the dripping mixture. By the time she reached the gate, the intruder was gone, vanishing into the darkness between houses. Gasping, Corinne rummaged for her phone to call Stan, then dialed the police non-emergency line. Her mind reeled. Did that person just pour concrete on the fort? Why would they do that? She flicked on the floodlight, squinting to see. Indeed, lumps of wet cement clung to the wooden ramp supports and the ground below. A large portion had oozed around the corners of the deck's pillars. Tessa hovered anxiously in the back doorway. "Mom, is that going to ruin the fort?" Corinne set her jaw. Not if we can stop it from setting. Let's see what we can do until Dad gets home. Grabbing a garden hose and a shovel, Corinne and Tessa began the frantic, messy task of trying to rinse off as much wet cement as possible before it hardened. The process was chaotic. Cement coated Corinne's arms. Tessa tried to scrape lumps away from the wooden posts. Water mixed with the cement, forming a sludge that trickled across the lawn. Thunder rumbled overhead, as if echoing the tension. Despite their desperate efforts, much of the mixture began to set around the ramp supports, too thick to simply wash away. By the time Stan arrived and the police showed up, the damage was evident. Portions of the ramp and posts were encased in an uneven crust of concrete. The fort itself seemed stable for now, but if the wood became trapped and corroded, it might rot or weaken. An officer took their statements, surveyed the damage, and scanned the yard for footprints. But with the fresh water from the hose and the impending drizzle, the scene was muddled. The officer concluded there wasn't much to go on unless a neighbor's security camera had captured the culprit. Corinne, shaking with anger and fear, confided in Stan. "I can't prove it was Karen, but who else would do this? She had those concrete bags on her driveway earlier." Stan pulled her close, face grim. "We'll figure this out. For now, let's see how bad the damage is in the morning." As lightning flickered across the sky, the Kims stood in their yard, hearts pounding. They had known Karen was petty, but they never imagined she would stoop to criminal vandalism, particularly an act so direct, risking being caught red-handed. The night's storm raged, but it was nothing compared to the storm of emotion building within the Kims, fueled by betrayal and the urgent need to protect their son's place of joy. By dawn, the storms had passed, leaving behind a steamy morning. Corinne and Stan rushed outside to examine the fort. Their hearts sank at the sight. Despite their late-night rescue attempt, the lower supports were caked in hardened concrete. Parts of the ramp's underside were plastered with it, forming jagged lumps. A couple of posts looked partially enveloped. Hunter, awakened by the commotion, peeked out from the patio. "Is it broken, Mom?" Corinne forced a reassuring tone. "We're not sure yet. We might have to replace some parts." While Stan made urgent calls to the hardware store for suggestions. Acid solutions, chisels, anything that could remove unwanted concrete. Corinne posted a plea on the neighborhood's Facebook group. "Our backyard play fort was vandalized last night with wet concrete. If anyone has outdoor security cameras that might show suspicious activity near Dandelion Lane around 11 p.m., please contact us." Dozens of shocked comments poured in. Neighbors expressed outrage, sympathy, and suspicion. Some mentioned seeing Karen's stash of concrete bags. Others asked if the Kims had spotted the culprit. One person recommended checking doorbell cameras up and down the street. Corinne's phone buzzed nonstop with supportive messages. It was heartwarming to see people rally behind them, but it couldn't erase the damage. They needed a plan to fix or replace the impacted sections of the fort. Late that morning, Melissa Roy arrived, eyes blazing. "This is insane. Who pours concrete on a kid's fort? Do you suspect Karen?" Stan sighed. "We do, but we have no proof. The cops said we'd need a clear photo or an eyewitness." She was gone by the time Corinne got outside. Melissa folded her arms. "That woman's out of control. Listen, if you need help scraping that stuff off or raising money to rebuild, count me in. My husband's handy. He can lend a hand with chiseling or replacing the wood." Stan and Corinne both teared up at the outpouring of support. They recognized a silver lining. If Karen believed she could isolate them, she'd miscalculated. Instead, the neighborhood's sense of justice was awakened. And if she had indeed been the culprit, she'd have a horde of angry neighbors to contend with. Still, the path ahead was uncertain. Removing hardened concrete from the wooden fort structure might be impossible in places. And if they had to rebuild, how could they ensure it wouldn't be attacked again? That evening, as Stan attempted to chisel away at the lumps of concrete, a group of neighbors arrived to assist. Some tried power washing the caked-on areas, while others used pry bars and hammers to break off chunks. Hunter watched from the back door, tears brimming. He couldn't stand the sight of his beloved fort, battered and half-submerged in gray residue. Meanwhile, Corinne stayed inside, scanning local doorbell camera footage that neighbors emailed her. Most clips showed only the side of the Kim's fence or silhouettes in the distance. Then, a neighbor 2 houses down sent a snippet, the top of a woman's head, possibly with short hair, slinking along the sidewalk. It was too dark and grainy to confirm an ID. Another camera from across the street caught a partial angle of someone carrying a large bag near the Kim's gate. Still not definitive, but it was enough for Karen's anger to flare. She compiled the clips and forwarded them to the investigating officer. She also typed an impassioned message to the HOA's official email, addressing the entire board. "We have been vandalized, with wet concrete poured on our child's accessible fort. We strongly suspect Ms. Georgina Trask, who was known to have multiple bags of concrete on her property and had previously harassed us over this fort. We demand an urgent investigation and a statement from the HOA regarding this criminal behavior in our community." Though part of Karen worried she might be stepping into a hornet's nest by openly accusing Karen, she felt there was no turning back. The time for polite compliance had ended. This was an assault on their son's right to a normal childhood. Within an hour, a curt reply arrived. "The HOA has received your complaint. The board will review your allegations. However, we advise restraint in making public accusations without conclusive evidence." HOA Board Secretary ***. Karen seethed. "Restraint? She poured concrete on a child's fort, and they want me to hush up?" Stan, covered in dust from the yard, read the email and shook his head. They might be circling the wagons around Karen. She's on the board, after all. He coughed from the cement residue. "We can't let them bury this." It was a tipping point. Karen posted a detailed account of the vandalism on the local Facebook group, tagging the HOA's official page. "I'm not letting them whitewash this," she said. "She can't keep terrorizing us." Word spread like wildfire. Dozens of residents commented, some sharing their own stories of Karen's petty or intimidating tactics. Others expressed solidarity with the Kims. Suddenly, the entire fiasco moved from hush-hush speculation to a neighborhood scandal in broad daylight. Despite the neighbors' best efforts at scraping and dissolving the hardened concrete, the wooden supports of the fort were compromised. In some spots, the wood was crushed under the dried cement. In others, it was impossible to free the ramp from the thick lumps. Even if they managed partial removal, structural integrity would be questionable over time. Stan stared at the battered ramp, shoulders sagging. "We might have to tear out most of it and rebuild. Even then, what's to stop her from coming back?" Hunter, sitting on the patio in his wheelchair, looked distraught. "Dad, I'm sorry. This is all because you tried to make something for me." His eyes were glassy with guilt. Stan knelt beside him, voice firm. "Hey, none of this is your fault. We're doing this because we love you. The blame is on whoever did this." Corinne joined them, kneeling and placing a gentle hand on Hunter's shoulder. "We'll figure out a solution that nobody can destroy so easily." A flicker of determination lit Stan's eyes. "Maybe we do something bigger, stronger, like a steel-framed structure. If she wants to pour concrete again, we'll have metal posts so it won't matter." Corinne blinked. "Steel frame? That sounds expensive. And the HOA might claim it's not in line with typical backyard appearances." Stan shrugged, a hint of defiance creeping into his tone. "We can keep it tasteful. But if they refuse to protect us from vandalism, we'll protect ourselves by building something that can't be sabotaged." The idea, radical as it was, began to take shape. Tessa overheard and chimed in. "If it's steel, we can also add new features, like a rock-climbing wall or a bigger ramp. Maybe slides and rope ladders. So more kids can play with Hunter." Corinne saw a glimmer in Tessa's eyes. She realized that if they had community support, maybe a bigger, more inclusive play structure could become a neighborhood asset. A statement, even, that no one could tear down. "Yes," Corinne murmured, nodding slowly. "We'll do it right. Make it accessible for kids with wheelchairs, crutches, anything. Turn this destruction into a bigger victory for everyone." Hunter brightened. "A fortress," he whispered. "A real fortress that Karen can't break." Stan smiled at the phrase, ruffling his son's hair. "Yes, a fortress, steel-framed and ramp-equipped. Let's see them try to sabotage that." Still, the looming question remained. Would the HOA block such an ambitious structure? Or would the groundswell of neighborly support be enough to override Karen's negativity? The Kims were about to find out. Over the next few days, Corinne and Stan discussed the feasibility of a steel-frame fortress. They discovered a local contractor, Manning & Sons, who specialized in custom metal play structures for schools and parks, typically with ADA-compliant ramps. When Corinne reached out, the contractor was intrigued by the story, especially the part about sabotage. "That's awful," said Gabe Manning, the company owner, during a phone call. "We can design something that's durable, safe, and meets any necessary guidelines. If the neighborhood is worried about aesthetics, we can keep the frames sleek and incorporate tasteful wooden panels. We've done that for public playgrounds to blend with community styles." When Corinne mentioned the potential HOA pushback, Gabe replied, "If you get enough community support, you might be able to present it as an asset. We've done inclusive playground proposals in other neighborhoods where the HOA ended up thrilled to have a unique feature. People often welcome a well-built structure that meets professional safety standards, especially if it's wheelchair-friendly." That gave Corinne renewed hope. Meanwhile, on the neighborhood Facebook group, comments poured in from parents of children with special needs, grandparents who wanted easy access for their visiting grandkids, and other supporters who felt outraged by the vandalism. A wave of positivity rose up. Some neighbors even offered to pitch in financially if it meant building a fortress that no Karen could sabotage. Sensing the momentum, Corinne formed a small committee of neighbors eager to help. Melissa Roy, Jake Darnell, and another friend, Priya Sethi, stepped up to gather signatures on a petition, stating, "We, the undersigned residents of Springtree Meadows, support the creation of an inclusive, steel-framed play fortress in the Kim family's backyard, ensuring a safe and durable environment for their child and any other children who wish to play." By week's end, they had over 100 signatures, more than a quarter of the entire neighborhood. Many cited that this new fortress could become a shining example of accessibility. People posted heart emojis and supportive words, dethroning Karen's typical negativity in the local discourse. Corinne and Stan decided it was time to propose the fortress officially, so they compiled the contractor's preliminary sketches and cost breakdown. The structure would be slightly taller than the original fort, but remain under 12 feet. It would feature a wide, gradual ramp, a small platform with railings, a slide, rope climbs for older kids, and protective mats underneath. They emailed the designs to the HOA board, explaining the rationale. "We have endured vandalism and require a more robust, inclusive solution. We have the community's support and will abide by the same height and boundary rules." Now the Kims waited, hearts pounding. If the HOA tried to block it, they would face a storm of neighborhood backlash. But if the board gave a lukewarm acceptance, the fortress would become reality and hopefully stand as a testament to triumph over sabotage. For a few days, there was no official word from the HOA. Rumors flew that Karen was furious behind closed doors, claiming the Kims were seeking attention and exaggerating the vandalism. Some said she was calling other board members to dissuade them from approving the fortress. But the board had to deal with the avalanche of pro-fortress petitions. One mother wrote a heartfelt letter about her child with cerebral palsy, describing how a local accessible play area would be a blessing. Another father praised the Kims for turning a tragedy into a positive step for the entire community. Finally, the HOA scheduled an emergency board meeting to address the Kims' proposal. Held at the local community center, it drew an unusually large crowd of neighbors. Many wore T-shirts emblazoned with "Include all kids" or "Support the Kim Fort." Chairs filled fast, and some folks stood along the walls. At the front of the room sat the 5-person HOA board. Karen, in her usual crisp attire, wore a pinched expression, arms crossed. The board president, Ron Figueroa, cleared his throat, scanning the packed room. "We're here to address the Kim family's application to build a custom steel frame play structure. Let's keep this civil." Corinne and Stan, a bit nervous, presented their design. Gabe Manning provided technical details. Corinne emphasized the wheelchair-accessible ramp, the sturdy metal supports, and how it would stay under the 12-foot limit. She also displayed the petition, thick with signatures. "Our community stands behind this," she concluded. Some board members nodded approvingly. A middle-aged woman, Janet Collins, asked about color schemes to ensure it blended with typical yard aesthetics. Gabe said the steel could be powder-coated in a neutral brown or green, with minimal visible metal. That seemed to satisfy most. At last, Karen spoke, her voice dripping with condescension. "Let me remind everyone that Springtree Meadows has standards for uniformity. We do not want large or industrial-looking installations overshadowing our lawns. This steel fortress sounds more like a public playground structure. If every homeowner builds something so grand, the neighborhood's image could suffer. An immediate wave of protest rose from the audience. People shouted variations of, "You can't speak for all of us," or "It's for kids with disabilities. Show some heart." The board president banged the gavel, urging calm. Ron then addressed Karen, his tone cautious. "I understand your concerns about aesthetics, Ms. Trask, but we must also consider the numerous supportive voices here. The proposed height is still within the 12-foot limit, correct?" Corinne nodded. "Yes, absolutely. We plan to keep it around 10 or 11 feet at max." Karen's eyes flashed. "And what about the ramp? This ramp is obviously more extensive than a typical short slide or ladder. Will it encroach on neighbors' views or property lines?" Stan replied, "It stays within our own yard, no different from building a deck. We verified the boundary. Our fence is tall enough that passers-by won't even notice much from the street." Another board member, Leonard Price, chimed in, "Ms. Trask, we have multiple testimonies in favor. I don't see a rule it violates, as the structure is being done by a professional contractor, meets the height limit, and has a presumably acceptable color scheme." Karen's expression soured. She tried another angle. "We must not ignore the possibility that this large fortress will become a nuisance with children crowding the yard, making noise. We have quiet hours here, do we not?" A sarcastic laugh erupted from the crowd. One resident shouted, "It's a play set. Kids have a right to play." Ron sighed. "Yes, but that's standard for any yard with children. As long as the Kims follow noise ordinances, there's no violation. Let's have a board vote." The hush that fell was electric. The 5 board members conferred briefly. Karen glared daggers, her knuckles white around her pen. Finally, President Ron announced, by a vote of 4-1, the board approves the Kim family's steel-frame fortress plan, contingent on color guidelines and staying within property lines. The official letter will be sent this week. The room erupted in cheers. Corinne felt tears of relief sting her eyes as Stan hugged her. Karen sat stiffly, refusing to meet anyone's gaze, her face reddening. The resolution was clear. The fortress would be built, and the majority of the community wanted it. Karen's last-ditch resistance had failed in the face of overwhelming support. Fueled by the board's official approval and the neighborhood's enthusiasm, Corinne and Stan quickly arranged the build schedule with Manning and Sons. The design had been tweaked for an attractive finish, steel supports with a brown, weatherproof coating, plus wooden slats on the walls to match the fence. The ramp would have slip-resistant surfacing, and the structure would feature 2 slides and a small rope climb. Neighborhood volunteers once again rallied, some donating funds to help offset the cost. The Kims were overwhelmed by generosity. Even local businesses chipped in. A landscaping company donated rubber mulch for the ground, ensuring a safe cushion for any falls. On build day, a weekend in late summer, trucks from Manning and Sons arrived early, unloading metal beams and wooden panels. Gabe Manning himself supervised the crew. A small crowd of curious residents watched from the sidewalk. Despite the memory of vandalism still fresh, excitement coursed through the air. Many whispered about how Karen might react seeing a professional team installing a structure she had opposed so vehemently. Corinne noticed a certain hush whenever Karen passed by. She occasionally saw the woman lurking at the far end of the street, seemingly holding her phone up, maybe recording or taking pictures. But if Karen had any sabotage in mind, she never attempted it in broad daylight amidst a crowd of neighbors. By late afternoon, the fortress began to take shape, rising sturdily on 4 steel pillars set in concrete footings. Gabe explained that each beam was anchored with commercial-grade bolts, making it near impossible to tamper with. The wide ramp, gently sloped, was welded to the main platform. Even if someone poured cement around the base, the steel structure wouldn't budge or degrade like wood. That evening, Stan and Corinne stood on the new platform, gazing over the yard. Tessa led Hunter up the ramp, pushing his wheelchair for a test run. The boy's grin was radiant. "It's higher than the old one," he exclaimed. "And it doesn't bounce when I roll on it." Tessa, equally impressed, admired the rope climb. "Once the finishing touches are done tomorrow, like the slides and the roof, this will be amazing." Corinne felt a lump in her throat. All that heartbreak and stress turned into something bigger and better and far more resilient. Karen's sabotage had inadvertently catalyzed a fortress that soared beyond the Kims' original dream. Over the next week, The finishing touches on the fortress were completed. The sides were adorned with wooden paneling that matched the fence. The metal ramp featured non-slip treads. 2 slides, one wide for easy wheelchair transfers, one narrower for typical foot traffic, were installed. A rope climbing net and a small swinging bridge connected 2 platforms. Hunter joked that all they needed was a moat. The transformation was astounding. Neighbors stopped by to admire it. Parents brought their kids for a quick peek, and the local community group raved about how it was the coolest backyard play set in Springtree Meadows. Even those without children appreciated the fortress's architectural flair. The steel beams, painted to match the yard, looked neat and modern. Karen and Stan hosted a small fortress launch party, inviting everyone who'd helped. People congregated around the ramp, marveling at how easy it was for Hunter to join in the fun. Tessa and her friends tested the rope net and slides, squealing with delight. The yard rang with the sound of carefree laughter. Notably absent was Karen. According to rumor, she was sulking over the board's decision, resentful that the Kims had gained so much community support. While she still held her HOA position, the fortress fiasco had eroded her influence. After all, the entire neighborhood saw how she had tried, and failed, to sabotage a child's accessible play area. Her reputation as Karen was sealed. To underscore the success, the board issued a brief statement praising the fortress as an innovative, code-compliant addition that demonstrates the spirit of inclusivity cherished by Springtree Meadows. The post was widely shared, further cementing Karen's defeat in the court of public opinion. One late afternoon, Karen found herself on the fortress deck, watching the sunset with Hunter. He rested in his wheelchair, gently swinging one foot off the edge. "Mom," he said softly, "why would someone pour concrete on a kid's fort?" Karen sighed, tucking his hair behind his ear. "Sometimes, people want to control everything around them, even if it hurts others. But there are always more good people than bad. We had so many neighbors stand up for us." Hunter looked around, eyes shining at the steel beams overhead. "I love this fortress more than the first one." Karen hugged him close, nodding. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." They lingered there, mother and son, safe in the structure that symbolized resilience over pettiness. Although they never received a formal confession from Karen, the Kims needed no admission of guilt. The fortress's very existence spoke louder than any words, an enduring testament to the neighborhood's solidarity and the unstoppable love of parents determined to give their child a place in the world, no matter who tried to bury it in concrete. Months later, the fortress still stood proud in the Kims' backyard, weathering rain and wind without a hint of wear. On weekends, neighborhood kids often gathered there, climbing ropes, sliding, playing make-believe. Hunter, beaming with confidence, was no longer sidelined. He was at the center of the fun, guiding younger children up the wide ramp, pointing out the best vantage points on the deck. The infamous vandalism attempt became a story told half in disbelief, half in pride. Residents would shake their heads, exclaiming, "Remember when that woman tried to sabotage the fort with wet concrete? Look how that backfired." Over time, Karen's sightings diminished. She seemed to have retreated from her constant patrolling, perhaps realizing that the neighborhood spirit overshadowed her intimidation tactics. In the end, the steel-frame fortress became more than just a backyard fixture. It became a symbol that, in the face of aggression, a community could unite to build something more inclusive and stronger than ever before. And for the Kims, it was a daily reminder that compassion and determination could trump even the most spiteful acts, leaving a legacy of laughter and belonging for children of every ability.